Just so I think we're recording, so I'm going to make a start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my webinar, Fuel to the Finish Line. Um, this has come at the request of a couple of you. A few people did message me off the back of some posts here in some of the Facebook groups. This did actually get so. I was really surprised because I was going to offer this out or post this in a lot more um, Facebook group saying I was doing this, but actually I think I had 100. I think I had 125 signups in about 3 hours. Because I get a notification every time someone has signed up, so my emails are just getting ping, ping, ping. So that's amazing. I really didn't know how many individuals would sign up to this. I'm fully aware people have signed up to this, so you are watching this on catch up. So for those of you watching this back, I hope you're well. And I hope you enjoy what I'm going to talk about this evening. So, in terms of introductions, my name's James. I'm a registered performance nutritionist based in the UK. And over the past sort of few years or so, I suppose I've been working with lots of runners, doing those just starting out in their running journey, to those that are maybe more seasoned athletes doing sort of marathons, half marathons, and sort of ultra distances and beyond. In terms of me, in terms of my background, I have a background in sports science with a specific focus in terms of nutrition. So I completed a undergrad in sports science or a Bachelor of Science in Sports Science at Brunel University in West London, and then went off to Loughborough University to do my master's. And I'm on what's called the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register, which is essentially an accredited program. In terms of sports, well, in terms of where I work across a whole range of sports from cricket, football, rugby. I work with a number of golfers. And outside of sport, I work for the NHS doing some of their healthcare programs. So individuals that are pre-diabetic, those looking for help with things like adult weight management as well. And of course, as I say, I've recently started to support a number of runners. So I have a number of resources, number of things that I've sort of been working on and building on, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those later on if you're looking for further support. As I say, I do enjoy running. So this was me back in 2022. I got the chance to run the London Marathon. I picked up a bit of an injury, so my time went out the window. But the biggest piece of advice I can give to you guys for those of you if this is your first marathon, is the fact that no one cares about your time. People are more impressed the fact you've run a marathon and you're doing something that such a small percentage of the world population have ever done. So it's an amazing feeling, an amazing achievement. So that's a little bit. That's a little bit about me. In terms of this evening, what I'm going to cover. So I've split this up into a number of key parts. So the first part is a little bit about why nutrition is important for runners, for running performance, training goals, health goals too. I'll talk a little bit about nutrition support or nutrition advice for before a run. So in the build up, what to be focusing on. I've got lots of example meals and snacks that you may decide to use, or just to demonstrate some of these key points. I'll talk about nutrition during a run as well. So particularly into some of your long runs. I'm aware some of you are doing the London landmarks. I'm aware some of you are also doing some marathons as well. So I'll talk a little bit about the difference in terms of fueling strategies too. I'll talk about nutrition after a run as well. So this is probably the most or one of the most important areas, particularly at the moment when you're sort of into your training program, that most runners tend to overlook completely. And actually it's your recovery nutrition that plays a really key role in terms of supporting your recovery. So you're not as sore, not as tired, not as fatigued, and actually it can help give you a little bit more in terms of that training adaptation as well. So I'll share with you some resources to help with this too. I will share also a few race day tips to help you. So for those of you that this is your first marathon coming up, your first half marathon, as well as doing the London Marathon, I have done the London Landmarks half marathon as well. Both I really enjoyed, and so hopefully from a nutrition point of view, some of the tips I've shared will certainly be useful. And then, of course, I'll finish off with a Q&A. So this session should be somewhere roughly about an hour in duration. So I've got about 40 minutes or so worth of content to go through with you. And then, of course, for those of you that are on the call live, if you do have any further questions, feel free to post them in the chat box. And anything I see, I will be I will go through those towards the end for everyone. So, if we start off with the why, the most important consideration of why nutrition is important, I often refer to nutrition, or I often say that nutrition is just 1% of a runner's development, but it's that 1% that has a huge impact on the other 99%. So it's your running that's obviously gonna give you the fuel you need to optimize your performance. So, as I say, obviously you want to get a good time, you want to be able to complete some of these races that you're working on. And so it's really important to make sure we are fueling ourselves sufficiently. Nutrition also plays a key role in terms of improving, supporting your recovery. So, like I say, this could be the difference between sort of how quickly you recover, ready for your next training session, how sore you feel after the race itself. It can impact things like your training adaptation as well. So, like I say, if you're doing all this running, all this training, but not giving your body the fuel it needs, you're not really going to get much benefit out of the training in the first place. Nutrition also plays a key role in terms of maintaining a strong immune system and helping to support injury recovery, things like that. I should say there's no if you're ever told or if you're ever offered a food that is immune boosting, this does not work. There's no one food that can boost your immune system, but a combination of lots of different food groups is really key, really important here. Nutrition obviously also plays a key role in terms of our overall health and well-being, so helping us to maintain a good overall health and well-being is going to be key to our day-to-day health too. So this is where, as I say, nutrition does play a key role, and hopefully in the next sort of hour or so, I'm going to share with you a number of key points to maybe help you with this in terms of having a successful training period in the build up to the competitions that you're going for. So when it comes to nutrition, I suppose one of the most common phrases or one of the most common things people say to me is, what's a good food? What's a bad food? Or overall, you start to hear these different foods and drinks labeled as good and bad. But actually, in terms of nutrition, there is no such thing as good food and bad food. It is more this case of everything in moderation. Certain foods, certain drinks we can have lots of every day. Certain foods, certain drinks we might need to reduce how much, how often we have them. A much better or a much more important strategy is this idea of context. So what I mean there is on the screen, you can see a few examples. So we've got a bottle of Lucozade Sport, we've got a handful of Jelly Babies, some Jaffa Cakes, some flavoured milk, and some dried fruit. These aren't necessarily the sort of best options in this case if you're at home or if you're sort of working in your office where you're spending most of your day sat down. A lot of these sort of foods, drinks, they're quite high in the sugar, quite high in some of those calories. So on like a rest day or a sort of day where you're not doing as much training, do you need some of these options? Maybe not. However, these are perfect to be having around training. So as you'll see in a moment, things like your Lucozade Sport, your sweets can give you the fuel you need during a long run, for example. And actually, in terms of the flavored milk, I should say milk overall as part of that, one of the most nutritionally complete one of the most effective recovery strategies to help you as well. So I'll talk a lot more about milk a little bit later on. As I say, there's no in terms of what's to come, in terms of your training over the coming weeks and months, there's no food, no drink that you guys need to be cutting out of your diet completely. Any athlete, any individual I work with them as part of that context is key. I work with them to identify maybe a better option. So if you're someone that has, let's say, a takeaway on a Saturday night and you're going for a long run on the Sunday, is that potentially the best option to have? Again, potentially not. So I'm not saying you've got to cut the takeaway out completely, but maybe think about, could you maybe move that to another night of the week? So you still have that enjoyment. Again, food is there to be enjoyed. And this is where hopefully what I'll share in this presentation, what I'll share or continue to share in the Facebook groups over the coming weeks and months is going to help you guys going forward. So, in terms of nutrition before a run, then, so really fueling starts about 2 or 3 hours before you actually start running. So, just for argument's sake, if you're going to run at, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd be thinking about that fueling around 7 o'clock, somewhere like that. There's a few points or a few things to consider around this. That time frame is really important for one, the fact it allows the body time to digest that meal. So it means that if you guys were to try and consume loads of food and then go for a long run, chances are you're going to experience what's called runner's gut. So runner's gut is that horrible feeling. I've experienced it myself where I've got something very, very wrong. And that's that feeling where you sort of feel like you need to stop, be sick, or maybe go to the toilet. So that time frame is really, really important. Again, I've seen a lot of posts, a lot of comments in the Facebook group where people say about things like getting a stitch, things like needing to stop. And most of the time, or most individuals, or speaking to most individuals around those situations, it is that sort of timing of their nutrition that they've maybe got a little bit wrong there. In terms of meal choice, I'm going to show you lots of examples in a moment. A few things just to bear in mind from a sort of science point of view is I try and choose meals that are high in carbohydrate but sort of quite low in the fiber and fat, just because they take a lot longer for the body to break down and digest. So by all means, if you're going to have sort of, well, if I show you, if you're going to have something like a sort of pasta dish, for example, I try and choose something in a tomato vegetable sauce rather than something that's in a sort of cheesy creamy sauce. So rather than having, let's say, a pasta carbonara, I'd have something like a chicken arrabbiata. So I'd maybe consider adding a little bit of protein to some of these meals just to help keep you fuller for longer. But a few sort of examples to help you guys then. Again, I suppose a lot of this would maybe depend on time of day that you're actually training, running, even the race itself. One thing to maybe start to think about, particularly on your long run days in the build up to the half marathon that you may be having, is actually this is as well as training to develop the body, develop the muscles and your aerobic system, amongst many other things. It's also a really great opportunity to actually practice your nutrition strategy in the first place. So this is where I'd certainly start to experiment. I'd certainly start trying different foods, different meals, just to see what works best for you. So if you're training sort of first thing in the morning, my go-to is sort of the porridge with a handful of fruit. So strawberries, bananas, it's entirely up to you. You could, of course, use other fruits, no problem at all. Again, if for those of you maybe not keen on sort of porridge, things like Weetabix, again, just as effective as well. If you're training maybe a little bit later on in the day, things like jacket potatoes, nothing wrong with those at all. And as I say, things like you could use things like stir fries. Again, stir fries, they're one of my sort of favorite meals, just because they're really simple, really quick, really versatile. So whatever ingredients you've got left over, you might have a load of random vegetables, stick it in with some chicken or some vegetarian protein option, and you've got a really simple, quick meal. So these are a few examples of what you may start to include as part of your pre-exercise, your pre-run meals there. Depending on how long you're running for. So if you're doing a shorter duration activity, so if don't worry too much about distance, but if we do this by sort of exercise duration, if you're running for anything or going for a run, anything less than 45 minutes, let's say, providing you've had a decent pre-run meal, you won't need to worry too much about this. But for some of your long run days, certainly incorporating maybe a pre-run snack about 60 minutes before. So just something really quick, really high in the carbohydrate, that sort of rapidly digesting sugar, is just going to give us a little bit more fuel to keep going. Again, I should say in terms of the body, we do have very limited stores of carbohydrates. So in terms of those carbohydrate stores, we only have enough for about 2 hours worth of high intensity exercise. So if you are starting to run for longer durations, this is where we might need to start thinking about some during run fueling as well, which I'll come on to in a moment. But again, some pre-run snacks could be a slice of white toast with strawberry jam, could be a piece of fruit, a banana, for example, cereal bars. With cereal bars, I know I've got Rice Krispie squares up there. You don't have to use this. You can use other brands if you prefer. The one thing I'd maybe say is maybe avoid the sort of dry brands. So I wouldn't necessarily use things like Nature Valley just because they're going to sort of dry your mouth out quite quick. As I say, you could use sports drinks. Nothing wrong with this at all. Lucozade Sport, or you can make your own. I'll show you that on the next slide actually. Things like smoothies as well. I love smoothies and sort of stir fries. I'm a massive fan of just because they're so quick, simple, versatile. You can use a whole range of ingredients. If you were having this as part of a post-exercise recovery, you can maybe mix in some milk just for a little bit of extra protein there as well. So I'll talk talk a bit more about smoothies a little bit later on as well. Obviously, training for a marathon, it can get sort of quite expensive. Obviously, by the time you buy some of your sports drinks, your energy gels, things like that. If you want to make your own, no problem at all. A really sort of simple version that I use. So if you're trying to make, let's say, a litre of sports drink, I'd mix 500 milliliters of water, 500 milliliters of fruit juice. So it could be orange, uh, blackcurrant, you prefer, and then maybe add a pinch of salt just to provide some of these electrolytes, some of these salts that you lose during sweating. And that actually leads me quite nicely onto the hydration side of things. So most people when they start thinking about their nutrition for in the build up to an event, to a run, is they actually focus more on the food side of things and really forget about the importance of drinking. The trouble is, if we're not drinking enough each day, we start to experience this dehydration. So the trouble with dehydration is, one, it affects our exercise performance. So you struggle to maintain that intensity, you struggle both physically, physiologically, and psychologically. But even in terms of day to day, you start to get things like the headaches, the tiredness, you struggle to concentrate, amongst many other things as well. In terms of how much you need to drink each day, when you look this up, you'll see guidelines will state, oh, we should be drinking at least 2 litres of sugar-free fluid per day. However, this is just based on a guideline based on the average adult in the UK. How much we actually need to consume will vary from person to person based on things like body size, based on things like how much exercise, how much movement you're doing. So if you guys start doing a lot more movement, a lot more exercise, you're going to start to sweat more, lose more fluid. So therefore, how much you need to drink is going to be a little bit higher. So for some individuals, they could be needing to drink maybe closer to 3 litres, even 4 litres of fluid per day, for example, there. In terms of nutrition, then during the run itself, this one, it depends on the duration that you're running for. As I say, for anything below 45 minutes of running, obviously if you want to take a water bottle with you, no problem at all. But if you're running for sort of any longer, if you're running for any longer than this, this is where I would start to maybe think about taking some carbohydrate on board. So if you're doing something, let's say over an hour, 90 minutes and beyond, that's where taking some form of carbohydrate on during the run itself is going to be really key. It's going to be really important. So in terms of what that might look like then, current guidelines are that we should be current guidelines are that we should be taking on at least around 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour. This is a sort of safe amount that most runners should be able to stomach, take on quite comfortably, or with a little bit of training would be absolutely fine. For those of you maybe going for a faster time, faster run, you could increase this carbohydrate intake up each hour. However, the one thing I'd maybe bear in mind is the more or the greater the amount of carbohydrate that you consume all in one go. This is where it's a lot for the sort of stomach, intestines to actually process. Again, during exercise, particularly a full body or whole body exercise, such as running, we do start to see this redirection of blood flow away from the vital organs towards the muscles to help sustain that exercise performance. So if you're consuming loads and loads of things like carbohydrates all in one go, this is where you can experience things like the runner's gut, the upset stomach, things like that. In terms of just to put that into perspective, what sort of 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate looks like. This is where, again, as part of your training over the coming weeks, I would certainly start to practice with some different items to see what works best for you. So in terms of sort of 30 grams of carbohydrate, this is the equivalent to a bottle of Lucozade Sport. So a 500 milliliter bottle of Lucozade Sport contains around 30 grams. In terms of energy gels, with energy gels, this really depends on the energy gel that you're having. Not all energy gels are the same. They all vary quite significantly in terms of carbohydrate content, viscosity. Some have caffeine, some don't. Some you need to take with water, some don't. In terms of if I use something like Science in Sport have about 22 grams of carbohydrate per gel. So this is about 1.5 gels per hour to get that required amount. If you want to use the sort of powdered fuel, so I've got some Science in Sport Beta fuel there on the screen. Probably the most common one most people post in the Facebook group is Tailwind. In terms of sort of the powdered versions, it's entirely up to you with this whether you want to use it. I don't have anything against some of these fueling powders and solutions. However, the only thing I would say is bear in mind the volume, the amounts that you actually need to consume over the duration of your event. Some of you might decide to run with a camel pack where you've got a pouch, you can sort of make this up. Equally, though, the amount of events I've done over the years where I see so many people where they then get to a water station, and the water station, the bottles are only small, they're only about 250 milliliters. So people are then trying to they're obviously hot, they're sweaty, their heart rate's going, and they're trying to sort of pour the mixture or pour the powder into their water bottles to mix there. So what you what you lose in time doing things like that, is it going to translate into race performance? Probably not. So, as I say, if you want to go down that route, you're more than welcome to. But there's equally lots of other ways. So that could be things like cereal bars. Again, cereal bars are quite different in terms of carbohydrate content. So that could be 1.5, even 2 cereal bars, depending on the carbohydrate content. In terms of sweets, so about 8 jelly babies would be the equivalent to about 30 grams of carbohydrate. If you're using jelly beans, again, just due to that slightly smaller size, you'd be looking about 12 or so. For those of you that really, really detest energy gels, you really hate them. As I say, I would certainly practice, or would certainly try with a few different options. So, some people, as I say, use the Science in Sport. This I find is maybe a good balance between the two, but equally there are some gels that are maybe like a much thicker, a sort of thicker mixture. Equally, there are some energy gels that you can get that are much more runny, so not as heavy on the stomach. So, a good example is things like Nutrition X, for example. They have a good quite a runny sort of energy gel. Again, people that say energy gels make their stomach turn, sometimes it might be worth bearing in mind how much you're actually consuming. So I'll give you a good example. At the weekend, I was working um, at the National Running Show with Beat It Sport. They're a sports nutrition supplement company. And the guy I was talking to, a runner, he said he was using Morton gels. Nothing wrong with Morton, but they are much higher in the carbohydrate content. So Morton gel has about 40 grams, so nearly twice as much as the SIS ones. And he was having about 3 of these an hour. So when he said to me, "Oh yeah, I had to stop and sort of find a hiding place," this probably explained why, where things like his gut wasn't actually used to this. So again, as part of this, the reason why I say it's really important to practice your nutrition strategies to help your gut, your digestive system adapt to some of these foods and drinks that you're going to be consuming as well. But as I say, for those of you that don't like energy gels, you could use the sports drinks, you could use cereal bars, dried fruit. You can make your own sort of oat bars, for example, using and mixing some of the fruits of your choice. There's a whole range of options here to help you. So that's a little bit around sort of nutrition during the run itself. I mean, in terms of what that looks like. So if you're doing like the event itself, if you're doing a sort of longer run, you don't need to start consuming straight away. Once you're providing you've sort of fueled yourself up effectively, I I would start or once you start running, I'd run for maybe about half an hour or so. That's when I'd then take your first energy gel or first form of fuel. So, as I say, although we only have about 2 hours worth of fuel in our bodies, we need to start to think about replacing that fuel sooner rather than later. So it's a little bit like if you imagine your body's a bit like your phone, you're not going to let your phone get to sort of 2% before, or under normal circumstances, you wouldn't let it get down to very low percent before trying to charge it. So it's the same sort of thing here. We need to think about replacing that fuel sooner rather than later. So, in terms of if you're trying to hit that sort of 30 grams of carbohydrate or 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour, I'd have your first energy gel after about, say, half an hour running, and then the next one every sort of 20 minutes or so over the duration of the event, the run itself. So once we've finished the run, once we've finished the run itself, this is where, as I say, something that's really important to take into account is your nutrition afterwards, because this is the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. um, maybe slightly, well, when you look at some of the science for the evidence around sort of nutrition strategies compared to some of these other things, so some of these massage guns, for example, it's this balance of physiologically things like the massage guns aren't actually doing a huge amount to the muscles itself, but actually it's your nutrition where there's a huge amount of evidence to show it helps with reducing things like the delayed onset of muscle soreness, for example, as I said earlier, enhancing that training adaptation as well. And this could be the difference between how you perform at your next training session or competition itself. So, a few things to take into account and consideration when it comes to this. When it comes to the recovery nutrition, this is what we call the 4 R's of recovery. I tend to add in a fifth R where it's basically doing these four, which I'll talk you through now, and then basically making sure you're repeating this on a regular basis after every single run or after every single form of exercise or training that you do. So the first one is the refuel. So if you imagine it again using my phone analogy, you've done your run, you've done this really hard training session. Now, in that duration, your sort of battery has started to really deplete, and we're almost on next to empty, sort of less than 10%. That's probably what it's going to feel like by the end of the race itself. So the first thing we need to consider is, of course, starting to refuel. So that's where the carbohydrate comes into play. So this is where I'd certainly factor in some meals and snacks that are going to help replace that energy that you've actually used during the run itself. In terms of the rebuild, this is where protein comes into play. So carbohydrate, in terms of its role within the body, if you imagine this is the fuel, this is the fuel, bit like putting the fuel in your car. This is essentially what carbohydrate does for us in terms of exercise performance. The protein is helping with the rebuild. So protein is almost your body's building block. So if you imagine protein, protein is made up of a series of amino acids. And if you imagine these amino acids are a bit like Lego bricks. So for those of you who had Lego growing up, if you've got kids, grandkids into their Lego at the moment, this is a bit like in the same way you put those pieces together to create those structures. This is really what's happening in the muscle itself. So factoring in or incorporating some form of protein is really key, really important as part of this as well. And then the third consideration, as I said earlier, this is the one that tends to get overlooked, is the importance of rehydration. So during your long runs, during training, same in the competition itself, you will dehydrate. You will be losing a lot of fluid in the form of, mainly in the form of sweating. So it's really important that we make sure we replace this. In terms of replacing that fluid, I wouldn't just be drinking a load of water. I'd factor in, or I'd be adding at least some electrolytes to the water itself, just to help with that fluid retention. Equally, I'd probably be choosing some carbohydrate-based drinks or things like that, just to provide some of that fuel. So it sort of links all three of these together. Not really nutrition related, but something that again is just as important, particularly as you get into sort of your sort of harder weeks with your training, is actually the importance of rest and recovery. Again, sleep is something that most individuals tend to overlook or maybe don't prioritize it as much as we should for one reason or another. But again, trying to aim for around 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is certainly recommended. There is further evidence or further benefits if you have just done a long run. Part of your recovery strategy might be having a sort of short nap, maybe sort of no more than about 30 minutes after your run, can help with that recovery process as well. So even the top level elite athletes will actually be factoring this in as part of their recovery to help with this. So again, in terms of what this looks like from a nutrition point of view, it's up to you what you do, how you do it. Obviously, straight as I say, straight away after a long run or after your events itself, last thing you're going to probably want to do is consume a load of food. So with this recovery, it's almost this idea of the sooner you start, the more effective you'll find it. So this is where my sort of recommendations here are maybe focusing on simple snacks. So that could be pieces of fruit, cereal bars. If you've got the storage for them, yogurts, sports drinks. It could be even an extra energy gel. They might be a bit fed up of energy gels by the time you finish your event. One of my sort of go-tos is milk. Milk is probably the most nutritionally complete beverages. So milk provides us with a good hit of protein, provides us with a good hit of the carbohydrate, and of course helping with the rehydration as well. So you could use flavored milk. As you can see, I've got some Yazoo on the screen, but even a pint of semi-skim milk is just as effective. So this was me after doing the London landmarks a couple of years ago, and you can see I've got my pint of milk. I wasn't able to find it, but somewhere there is a picture of me sat on the train on the way home, and me drinking the milk. And I've got in the background there's this guy just giving me the most bizarre look, but it works. There's a lot of science to back up those claims. Once you have, or once you're in that position where you can maybe take on something a little bit more substantial, again, it's sort of up to you with this. I'd always factor in, as I say, some form of protein. So that could be sort of pasta dishes, rice dishes. So, as I say, things like stir fries, just something quick, easy, simple. You can flavor as and how you like. It could be chicken pasta dishes, it could be salmon, fish, and of course any sort of vegetarian protein alternatives would be absolutely fine. Again, if you're having to travel a long way, even making up some snacks. So again, maybe like chicken salad wraps. Again, that's always my go-to, just so you're getting something to help the body to start to recover. So that's a little bit in terms of the nutrition sort of before, during, and after a run. I hope that has been useful. A lot of this would apply to um, training and competition itself. What I've got now is just sorry. What I've got now is a few extra things just to consider and to maybe help you over the coming weeks with your training. So the first one, as I said, just going back to what I mentioned about the runner's gut. So runner's gut is basically this. It's not nice. Some of you may have experienced, but it's very common in runners where basically it's this sort of gastrointestinal distress. So that's stress that's placed on the stomach, where you start to feel like you're going to be sick, the diarrhea, you get the cramps, the stitches, and things like that. And it's really caused by sort of one or more of three things. So the physical movement, so going for a run, obviously your stomach, your intestine is moving a lot. It's that physiological effect from the redirection of the blood flow that I mentioned. And of course, in terms of nutrition, it can be impacted by your hydration level, can be impacted by the type of food that you're consuming. So, hence why I said earlier, don't be consuming lots of sort of high fat, high protein meals, because you might find that this is impacting it. So, in terms of just to highlight a little bit more around the nutritional factors. So one thing is the meal time. And as I say, if you eat too much too soon, too close to exercise itself, your body hasn't had the chance to digest these foods and meals. So it's really important to factor in that window. As I said, that sort of 2 to 3 hour pre-run is a good guideline. I appreciate some of you might like to run early morning. And so if you run at, let's say, 6 o'clock in the morning, that would mean you getting up at 3 a.m. That's not going to happen. I fully appreciate that. So I have got another part to this coming up in terms of how I'd recommend managing this. As I say, type of food can also make a huge difference. So if you are consuming meals that have high in fat, high in fiber, same thing here, take longer to digest. And again, if you are sort of exercising in this dehydrated state, can make you feel sort of quite ill, can make you want to throw up or feel like you need to go to the toilet. So a few tips just to maybe help you manage this going forward. As I say, focus on your hydration. Making sure you are consuming, drinking something on a regular basis throughout the day during exercise, just to replace that fluid lost, it is really important. In terms of your nutrition, one of the biggest tips, if there's nothing you take away from, this webinar, is, well, two things. Is one, practice your nutrition in training coming up, and as part of that, and you'll see in a moment, please, please, please don't try anything new on race day. Doesn't sound like very much, but even swapping brand of energy gels can have an absolutely catastrophic effect on your race itself, which I'll talk more about in a moment. So, like I say, over the coming weeks, practice your nutrition, practice with gels, see how you get on. Some people, they get a little bit of what I call taste fatigue. So, you get a bit fed up of the same consistency, same flavor. So, maybe trying a few different flavors of gels or even swapping in some of those foods that I mentioned previously. As I say, just think about the timing of your meals. So, if sometimes the way it works, I appreciate you don't always have this sort of ideal 2 to 3 hour window before. This is where it might be worth factoring in sort of a bit of a plan, bit of a strategy in place. So obviously, if you're eating, the closer you eat to a run or the competition itself, I'd maybe reduce the amount that you're consuming to help there. For those of you that do like to train early doors, early morning, as I say, if you're going to go out for a 6 a.m. run, if a 6 a.m. run tomorrow morning, you getting up at 4 a.m. is not going to happen. So, what I'd maybe recommend here is the night before, I'd have a sort of fairly high carbohydrate based meal. So, pasta dishes, for example, my go to the night before a sort of long run is a bolognese, just really simple, quick. I can add lots of vegetables to it. As part of that, I might then have a sort of high carbohydrate based snack as well, just before I go to bed. So when I wake up, realistically, by the time I wake up, by the time I actually start running, I've got maybe 20 minutes or half an hour or so. So you might just grab a small carbohydrate snack, slice of toast with some jam. That could be a cereal bar. It could even be another energy gel, just to give you this little bit of fuel, just to get you going. The other part I thought I'd share is just a few tips to bear in mind in terms of race day itself. So, first of all, I'd always look at what's actually available on the course itself in terms of how often and actual different options. So, I've got a few examples. So, I'll talk you through sort of nutrition provision at the London Marathon and then nutrition provision at the London Landmarks Half Marathon as well. So, it's probably quite hard to see on your screen, depending on sort of how big you're watching this, but in the sort of bottom corner, hopefully you can see my mouse moving around. This is really the race start. As you can see, everyone runs in these separate waves, which you'll find when you go pick up. You'll find out which wave you're in when you go pick up your race number, and then everyone combines together after about 5K ish, thereabouts. As you start to run along, it might be worth you sort of having a look at this map yourself, maybe after this, just so you can see it in a bit more detail for yourself. But if you look in the top right hand corner, you can see a number of different symbols. So anything with like an LS will be a Lucozade sports drink stand. So there's a couple of these over the course of the route. There's to the right of it a Lucozade Sport energy gel stand. So again, at certain miles, you will have access to grab a gel if you wish. And then, of course, there's lots of water. Water is pretty much available every 2 miles or so in the marathon itself. So this is obviously the route. I'm sure most of you have seen this. So you can start to see where these stations are, or where this is available over the course of the route itself. Just as a bit of an overview, as I say, water is provided pretty much every 2 miles or so. Lucozade Sport won't be provided in bottles, it'll be provided in sort of fairly small cups at miles 9, 15, 21, and 23. And the energy gels you get at miles 19 and 22. Again, it comes back to my point around choices. Lucozade energy gels, they are incredibly sweet. I've used a lot of different brands in the past and I've never had something so sweet in all my life. So if you are going to have these, I'd maybe purchase a few, order a few as soon as possible, just for you to practice with, just so you get used to that taste. Because as I say, even having one of these energy gels, if it's something that doesn't quite agree with your system, this could be the difference between you sort of getting to the race, getting on for that sort of desired time, or you having to maybe stop and find a number of toilets along the way. For those of you doing the London landmarks, this has been sort of quite hard to find in terms of nutrition provision. From what I can see, and off the top of my head from when I did this, again, it was a few years ago, there was pretty much no nutrition provision. It was all pretty much take everything yourself. The only thing I could find is that now you get water every roughly 2 to 3 miles. So again, same thing here. I would maybe factor in sort of your own strategy. That means you don't have to rely on what's available on the course itself. So, a few tips to maybe help you with this then. The first one is to enjoy it, enjoy the training, enjoy the race itself. You've done all this training. Most of you have probably had to do a lot of fundraising. It's your chance to reward all your efforts, get that medal at the end. So don't forget to enjoy it along the way. The second thing, please don't do anything different on race day. As I say, the amount of fleets, runners, all sorts of sports, to be fair, where they end up training in sort of one way using certain brands of certain products, and then they say on race day, oh, look, or their friend offers them. And it could be something really small. I'll give you a good example. The amount of people I see where they're offering sweets, jelly sweets. It could be Haribo, for example. But even that, switching from Haribo or having something that you've never practiced with, it could be a really big disaster. There's when I did the London Marathon, it's about 16 miles in, there was people handing out Domino's pizza. So he's just eating pizza on the side and he was handing it to the runners, and runners were taking it. Trouble is, about half a mile later, they were then sort of stood at the side of the track, throwing up or having to run to the nearest toilet because again, it's something very high in fat, um, very high in fat, very highly processed, and yeah, not something I would recommend for a runner. So this is where over the coming weeks, obviously there's plenty of time before the London landmarks, plenty of time before the London Marathon itself. I'd really start to practice your nutrition strategy. I'd treat every training session in the same way, ensuring you are trying to fuel yourself as effectively as possible. It does become a little bit of trial and error in terms of what works for you. You might find things work better for you than others. Obviously, if you guys do have any questions, comments, obviously I'm part of these Facebook groups. So I basically try and post once a week just because I don't want to sort of spam all these Facebook groups with loads of nutrition information. But if there are any topics you would like me to cover, just do feel free to drop me a message. The other thing for race day as well is use your friends, your family, your supporters. I'm sure most of you, all of you, are going to have people come and watch you for the race itself. This has worked so well for me in the past. So when I've done marathons, things like that, what I've done in the build up is actually give my friends, family, Lucozade Sport, I've given them lots of extra gels. So then I have a rough idea of where I'm going to meet them at different points around the course. So as I'm approaching them, they then had those items ready for me, and I can go, oh, for this part, I'm going to grab a couple of extra energy gels. And that would see me through for the next leg. And then when it got to, I don't know, when I'm going around the Isle of Dogs, I might go, oh yeah, I might use the Lucozade Sport, for example. So one, it means that you don't have to carry crazy amounts of gels, crazy amounts of other products to help you. Again, because the other thing that you'll see, if anyone's going to this Meet the Experts Day, I think it's in a few weeks' time, New Balance will be there and they will be offering or promoting these sort of running belts. The only thing you'll find with these running belts is they have very, very limited storage anyway. So it's not to say that you shouldn't use them or shouldn't purchase them, but again, just bear in mind that you're not going to be able to fit in however many energy gels that you're going to need. So this is where, as I say, friends, family, obviously chance to catch up, say hello, but then at the same time, use them to your advantage in terms of supporting your nutrition strategy too. So I am starting to come towards the end of today. I can see there's lots of questions that have been posted in the chat box, which is great. So I'll come on to those in a moment. For those of you on the call now, if you do have any other questions, do feel free to start typing those in, and I'll get to those in a moment. One thing I like to do with any sort of webinar or talk I deliver is finish off with my sort of top 5 tips. So the first one, as I've said throughout today's session, if there's nothing that you've taken or nothing else that you've taken from this evening, use the training time to practice your strategy so that when it comes to race day, you've got this almost perfect plan in place of, right, I'm going to have this at this time. You know it works because you've practiced it in your training. As I say, don't forget to drink. This is something else I see a lot. I often refer to water as the forgotten nutrient just because most people don't drink anywhere near enough as they should. So again, invest in a water bottle, acts as a nice visual reminder. Set a timer, even for a short period of time. It could be for a week. Set a timer on your phone every 20, 30 minutes or so, just to remind yourself to have a few sips of water or drink, whatever it may be. Again, tip three, always about the recovery. This is the thing, as I say, most athletes, most runners don't take into account, but this is the thing I almost guarantee is going to make the biggest difference to how you feel over the coming weeks. Training for a half marathon, training for a marathon, it is incredibly physically demanding, and it is your recovery nutrition strategy. I promise is going to make a huge difference here. In terms of meals, again, particularly around training, just bear in mind what I said. So try and avoid those sort of highly processed, high fat, high creamy, fibrous meals, just because they're the ones that are more likely to result in the runner's gut. After training, a little bit different. The other thing that I mean, again, for it's always hard to try and cram a lot of nutrition content into sort of one sort of hour webinar. But don't forget about the other food groups. So I've talked a little bit about carbohydrate and protein. So carbohydrate, it does provide you with the fuel. Protein will support your recovery. But then equally, you've got all of these other food groups which will be just as important to supporting your performance and health as a runner as well. So things like consuming a wide variation of different fruits and vegetables will provide you with lots of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that help with muscle recovery, muscle repair, things like that. In the same way, things like your dairy products, your cheese, your milk, your yogurt, again, provide a really fantastic source of calcium to help maintain strong bones. And again, a good source of protein there as well. So I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope this has been useful to those of you on the call now. I hope this is useful for you for those of you watching this back. If you are on social media, I do have a sort of running nutrition sort of Facebook page, Instagram account. If you're not following it already, I am trying to post more content on there, little tips, recipes to help runners. Again, if you do know, if you are part of a running group, or if you know any other runners that might find this useful, I'd love to grow it as much as possible. It is something that I am trying to do more of. So if you do have any sort of fellow runners that you think would find it helpful, I'd love it if you can maybe sort of promote this to people around you. If you are looking for further support with your nutrition, I recently launched a Fuel the Runner online nutrition course. This is a self-guided course. There's about 12 hours worth of content in there where I've put together a number of modules to help you when it comes to your nutrition. So I cover everything from the role of all those different food groups, what to eat before, during, after training, managing competition itself. So particularly if you're staying away, there's a section there on supplements to support performance. I haven't really talked about supplements this evening. I'm not sure if there's any questions about supplements coming up, but there's a whole section there on supplements that would support you, supplements equally that don't work, no matter how much evidence or well, how much marketing you see around them. And I've also put in a section there about sort of health and well-being, so things like meal planning, navigating the supermarket too. It has been a really popular course at the moment, or until the 31st of January. It is on a 30% or 33% discount. So at the moment, £65, and it will go back up to 99 come the first of come the 1st of February. It has been very popular so far, so these are just some of the reviews that I had for the course itself. Or more recently, I have actually launched what I call the Athlete Nutrition Hub, Fuel the Runner, which I'm adding lots of content to, and I've designed it in a way to basically support runners as more of a community option. So there's access to a nutrition hub full of lots of infographics, nutrition resources on a whole range of topics, not just for running itself, but equally overall health and well-being. So tips for maintaining a strong immune system, tips for a little bit more about recovery amongst many other things too. There's a recipe hub on there that covers a whole range of different meals, a whole range of different dietary requirements. Again, I'm uploading lots of content to this over the coming weeks. Each week we do a bit of a like progress review just to help There's a chance to be part of a community, ask questions, share your thoughts and opinions as well. Each month, I host a monthly webinar based on the topics of whatever people want. So I put out a poll, say, I'm doing this webinar on this date. What would you like me to cover? And people might say, can we have a session on supplements that would support running performance? And there's lots more that I have planned as part of that. So that's a sort of monthly subscription, and that's about 14.99 at the moment. So that is pretty much everything from me for this evening. So I do hope you have found that useful and beneficial. For those of you that have joined the call live, thank you very much for joining. For those of you watching this back, I hope you have found this beneficial. What you can see on screen is all of my contact details. So if you do need sort of further support, further information from me, then please do let me know. The other part, of course, is the questions. So let's go back. I won't read out anyone's names. So when you say fruit juice for your own hydration drink, is that pure juice or cordial that you dilute? Yeah, very good question. It depends on the brand with this one. So you could use sort of orange juice itself, because you'll have the sugar in there. Obviously, some of these cordials, if it's the no added sugar cordial, for example, it will still have a little bit of sugar in there, but maybe not as much. So I'd maybe mix this with the juices itself. Um, for women of peri/menopause age, it's even more important that we get a high dose of protein really quickly. Yeah, absolutely. Some of what I've sort of shared here is sort of, I suppose, general guidelines, but yeah, obviously, like you say, for sort of menopause or perimenopause females, some of your nutrition requirements are maybe a little bit different. So like you say, obviously prioritizing the recovery is really key. So protein or regular amounts of protein throughout the day is really important. Another question, is there a place for safe, healthy weight loss during marathon training, and if so, any tips? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. This is a brilliant question, and this is something that it's a great question, and the answer is yes, there is. It's something that I see a lot of. Again, it's not just runners. I see a lot of athletes get this wrong, and I think the most common things I see is when people start to have the same thing every single day. The other thing is when people start to go on these crash diets. The trouble is, it goes back to what I said at the start. These crash diets where you're not eating anything. Again, it's a bit like if you try and drive your car from London to Scotland on half a tank of petrol, you're only going to get so far before your car conks out, the performance is affected, there's no energy. And this is really what's happening in the body as well. So, absolutely, in terms of weight loss, I'd always ensure that we are fueling, particularly on those long run days. That's the really important part, and around sort of the training itself. The meals outside of training, you could start to reduce your calorie consumption. I mean, there's lots of day-to-day swaps that you can make. One thing I've actually put together in that online course is a little bit more about sort of nutrition for weight loss and food choices, but things like you go to a coffee shop, for example. If we let's use Costa Coffee, for example. So if you had, let's say, a black Americano, medium black Americano is about 18 calories or so. If you went to like a cappuccino, that's about 140, 150-ish calories. You go up to something like a latte, 160-ish calories. Some of those flavored lattes, some of the hot chocolates we had in the build up to Christmas, some of those are sort of over 300 calories, and some of those have more sugar in than a sort of standard can of full fat Coke. So things like that can make a huge difference as well in terms of the choice. Sorry, in terms of weight loss and health goals as well. So um, as long as I'd always focus on making sure you're fueling for the training that you're doing. But then on your sort of rest days, quieter days, do you need a load of carbohydrate? No, absolutely not. So what I might do is reduce that portion of carbohydrate down, add a little bit more protein to each of your meals, and then lots of vegetables, lots of salad. So lowering calories, lots of different vitamins, minerals, fiber that helps keep you fuller for longer, and again further supports that recovery too. I hope that helps. Um, Thanks for the streams. It's been good. I'm pleased to hear. I hope this has been useful for everyone. Um, What are your thoughts on running without breakfast? I wondered if someone might ask this. Um, Running fasted or running without breakfast, would I recommend? I'd say you'll hear people that say, "Oh, I train. I'm training fasted. I'm not taking anything on during my runs because that results in more fat loss." What most people do is don't actually read what that actually means. Training fasted can help in terms of we see a number of adaptations within the body. So we see this increase in mitochondria production. So mitochondria production is really important in terms of being able to utilize oxygen and things like that. However, when it comes to performance itself, carbohydrates are king. Trying to run if you're doing a short run or shorter run, anything sort of under an hour, running without breakfast, running fasted, you'll be okay. If you're running anything longer, so if you are doing sort of over an hour or sort of further or longer even, this is where you probably find that you're actually going to start to really struggle, both in terms of performance or how fast, how long you can sustain that intensity, but then equally as part of that, also having quite an impact in terms of your recovery, in terms of how you feel outside of running. So going back to what I said, affecting how you feel sort of mentally, physically, physiologically as well. So for me, I'd always say maybe having a small, as I say, probably to summarize that up, um, running without breakfast. If you're doing a shorter run or shorter duration exercise, no issue. If you're running for a lot longer, I would be recommending taking at least something small. Um, if there's a sort of reason behind sort of running without breakfast in terms of your training early, that time window that I mentioned, something small, even if it's an energy gel, just provides you with a little bit of a little bit of energy just to get you going. I hope that helps. Is there anything I need to consider re-nutrition and hydration? I have PCOS, and as part of that, I have impaired glucose tolerance. I'm a first time in London and by no means a fast runner. Uh, Interesting. Again, things like PCOS, it's not an area that I specialize in. I'll be perfectly honest. Um, and again, things like this, the thing you find with a lot of it is unfortunately the lack of research that's available for a lot of these areas. So there's a really good, and this would apply to anyone if you're looking for further support for other things. If you have a look at the British Dietetic Association, and if you Google British Dietetic Association or BDA food facts and then PCOS, um, it might give you a few sort of extra tips or extra factors and things to consider. So I hope that helps with that one. Also, I'm staying in a hotel. Oh, um, Also, I'm staying in a hotel the night before. Any tips on what I should be heading for at the breakfast? Oh, sorry, I've got notifications appearing. I'm staying in a hotel the night before. Any tips for what I should be heading for at the breakfast buffet? As a full English is out of the question. I don't want runners go. Yeah, you learn. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Um, I would, without knowing sort of what the hotel is where you're staying, I would I would potentially take things with you that you're used to just to be on the safe side. So that could be, because again, it goes back to my point. Things like porridge. Porridge is, you can't go wrong with porridge. But if you're someone that likes porridge that's a little bit more runny, and then let's say you're staying in a Premier Inn, for example, sometimes you might find that it's a bit thicker than what you're used to, and even that sort of slight change there can be quite or can make quite a difference. So I always say to people taking, even like if you take the sachets of porridge in your um if you take the sachets of porridge in your sorry, not kit bag, your sort of travel bag. That might provide you with a quick, easy option there. Fruit again, can't really go wrong with the fruit. It might, I mean, the other thing that I do quite often if I'm doing this for athletes is actually have a look at the menu that's available. So, with some of these hotels that you can actually see what the menu is, and you can compare what's going to be available on sort of the morning of or on race day compared to then what you've got at home. So you can then make sure you've got some of that available as well. So, um, there's a few things or a few factors to consider there. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of your question, absolutely, I wouldn't be going for the full English, but again, um, things like toast is always a sort of safe one. Things like, again, they have things like crumpets, for example. Whatever you whatever you start to practice with over the coming weeks, that's what I try and choose in the hotel buffet. I hope that helps. Um, Another super helpful. Thank you so much to see you. Really do appreciate it. No worries at all. It's my pleasure. Yeah, as I say, there was a few people that reached out just saying, would I run something like this? And um, yeah, as I say, obviously, thank you very much for those of you who've joined live. There was over 150 people that have actually signed up to this. Um, that have signed up to this. Um, yeah, I'm more than happy to do things like this. And obviously, if you're watching this back, what I will do is sort of set this when we finish. I'll stop the recording. It takes a little bit of time for it to render off. I will upload it, and then either tonight, see how long it takes, or tomorrow, I will send this webinar or the link to what rewatch this webinar out to you all. So you might get this sort of once or twice if you have signed up to my newsletter as well. But yeah, um, thank you for answering my questions. Thank you for hosting the webinar. So good. I'm pleased to hear. As I say, I've got lots of content that I will keep posting in the Facebook groups, but sometimes it's just a bit easier to explain some of these concepts, this information as a video or in live person rather than reading. But yeah, if there's any other questions or comments from anyone, please do let me know. I can't see anything else in the chat box. If not, as we are at the hour, well, for those of you that have joined this evening, thank you very much. I hope you have found this useful. For those of you watching this back, again, I hope you do find this useful as well. As I say, if you guys are on social media, I will be uploading lots more content to help you guys. If I don't speak to you beforehand, I wish you all the best with your training and success at whichever event you have coming up. If there's anything you need from me between now and then, if there's anything you want to follow up with, by all means, feel free to reach out. So again, you can see my contact details there as well. But I guess on that note, that is everything from me for this evening. So thank you all very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your evening, enjoy your training, and I might see you out on the race course soon. Um, but yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. That's us done. You're free to go. No worries, guys. You're very welcome.